Macy had almost fallen asleep, but she stirred awake and frowned when Edward banged on the door. She got up and turned on the lights, her brows furrowed. Then she limped to the door. Edward's fist hit the air when she opened the door. "Mac, why are you home, and why the heck are you banging on my door at midnight?" She snapped at him impatiently. Her attitude fueled his anger further. He immediately grabbed her arm and yelled at her. "What's with that question? Can't I return to my house?" Macy's impatience immediately vanished. Instead, she lowered her head and looked upset. At first, Edward thought that she had caved in from being intimidated, but she reached out to take his hand off hers. At that moment, he sensed something amiss. He released her hand and spotted blood on his palm. It turned out that he had hurt her wound by squeezing her arm too hard. Macy stared at the man before her through tears. He had caused a scene in the middle of the night. "Are you hurt?" He tried to check on her arm, but she moved away. She asked him, "Oh, are you only asking me now? You are the reason behind this, remember?" Edward was taken aback. Then, he recalled how he had left her by the road earlier that day. He rested his gaze on her elbow, where she suffered serious scrapes. The wound started bleeding again after he grabbed her arm. His eyes drifted downward, noticing her bandaged toes and the blisters on her heels. Her toes were bleeding as well. He wanted to say something, but Macy was about to turn around and shut the door. "Let go of me," she warned him, frowning when she failed to shut the door. Unable to apologize, he blurted out, "Why didn't you pick up? Did you know I?" She smirked. It turned out that he banged on her door after midnight, just because she didn't pick up his calls. She couldn't believe that his behavior was over such an important reason. She limped over to the bedside table. He watched her with a stuffy feeling in his chest. "My phone shattered after it fell to the ground. It's broken. I can't get it to work. Is that an acceptable reason?" She showed him her phone. He was speechless at the sight of her shattered phone screen. "Macy!" She shut the door in his face when he spoke, leaving him standing outside the room. A few seconds later, he slowly turned around and left. Macy, who was awake from her sleep, felt irritable in her bedroom. Edward said that he had called her many times. When she checked her phone, she saw 30 to 40 missed calls from him. She thought, "What's wrong with him? Why is he spamming me with calls after he ditched me for Sharon?" After that, she turned her phone off and went to sleep without giving it any further thought. Edward took a quick bath and went to bed in the main bedroom. His phone lit up from a text from Sharon. She inquired about Macy's condition and whether or not he had gotten home safely. She even reminded him not to give Macy a hard time. After reading Sharon's text, any lingering sorry feelings for Macy vanished. If Macy hadn't tried to scald Sharon, none of the later events would have happened. He replied, "Don't bother asking about her. Go to sleep early. Good night." Sharon, who received his text in her hotel room, smiled satisfactorily at his impatience toward Macy. It was past midnight by now. Edward still had to work the next day. He turned off the lights and tried to sleep, but he woke up again from the discomfort in his stomach. He had suffered from gastric issues since high school. It was Macy who had shown him care by reminding him to take his meals daily. His condition improved when he was in college, but it was triggered again after he started drinking at business events when he started work. Every night, Macy would make him hot soup so that he could sleep through the night. He wandered to the kitchen, assuming she would save some soup for him. However, he found nothing on the stove or fridge. At that moment, he recalled the spilled soup in the private dining room and thought that it was such a pity. At the same time, he was angry at Macy for not preparing more of the soup. His first thought was to wake her up to make some for him, but he paused in his tracks. His lips pursed, and he fell silent for a while before looking for the first aid kit. However, the kit was nowhere to be found. Frowning, he suddenly recalled seeing it by Macy's bedside table. The kit was in her bedroom. What remained of his conscience kept him from knocking on her door again. Instead, he searched for the spare key and used it to unlock her door. When he heard the sounds of the handle turning, he held his breath and walked into the room on tiptoe. However, he soon realized how pathetic he was to act like a thief in the house he owned. A mix of light fragrance and medication lingered in the air of the dim bedroom. Macy lay in bed, her thin blanket barely covering a corner. Edward didn't look at her too closely. He was ready to grab the first aid kit and leave. From the corner of his eyes, he saw Macy's back as he got up, illuminated by the outside light. The hem of Macy's top was slightly rolled up, revealing large patches of bruises on the skin that were starkly visible under the warm light. Edward paused briefly, his gaze lingering for 2 seconds. Ultimately, he got up and left, gently closing the door behind him. He figured that it was just a surface wound and wasn't anything life-threatening. If Macy hadn't intentionally scalded her foot out of jealousy toward Sharon, he wouldn't have carried her, or later let go, causing her injuries. Edward didn't sleep well through the night. His stomach had become sensitive, and even medication only provided slight relief. It was far from recovery or comfort that he woke up early before the alarm rang. As he stepped out of his room, he nearly collided with Macy, who was leaving her room that was just across the corridor. "What are you doing?" he asked instinctively. "Making breakfast," Macy replied flatly as she stumbled toward the kitchen. Edward stood frozen in place. He had always woken up and had breakfast without paying attention to who prepared the meals. It never occurred to him that she had been waking up at 5 a.m. every morning to cook. Watching her slightly unsteady figure, he said, "You don't have to." Macy stopped in her tracks and turned her head back. For 2 years, she had attended to Edward. She had to get up and cook even when she had a fever. He had tormented her in every possible way. This was the first time he had told her that she didn't have to cook. Looking down at her injured foot, she wondered if he had finally grown a conscience after seeing what he had done to her. But he soon added, "You don't have to prepare dinner either. I'm eating out with Sharon." With that, he walked out the door without looking back. Macy glanced at the door and curled her lips in a self-deprecating smile. She inwardly sneered. She wondered if he even had a conscience and thought that she was just being delusional. Not having to cook suited her just fine. She was tired of serving him anyway. She went back to sleep and got up at 8 a.m. to change the dressing on her wounds, only to realize that the gastric pills were missing from the first aid kit. She frowned slightly when she remembered that her door hadn't been locked this morning when she opened it. Did she forget to lock it last night? Or was the medicine stolen just like the last time? She didn't dwell on it too much. Instead, she settled down on the living room carpet with her laptop. She logged into an online learning platform in the morning to review her university coursework. In the afternoon, she practiced coding and worked on character designs and scene illustrations on her graphics tablet. For 2 years, she had stayed out of the public eye. Although she had forgotten some advanced concepts, her foundational art skills remained sharp. She had even taken freelance commissions occasionally, earning extra income and gathering a small fan base. Time passed quickly. By sunset, Macy got up to fetch some water and ordered takeout. But just then the door lock clicked. She looked over. A second later, the door swung open. Sharon's beaming face came into view. "May, I came to see you. How's your injury?" Sharon grinned widely as she stepped inside. Behind her was Edward. Carrying groceries, Macy's expression remained cold as she turned away. Sharon was the reason she had suffered burns on her skin. And now, she had the audacity to show up at her door. Sharon's actions reminded Macy of a fox pretending to be concerned for a hen. "May." Sharon pouted when Macy ignored her. "What kind of attitude is that?" Edward scolded Macy, frowning. "Sharon came to check on you and even offered to cook for you. Don't be ungrateful." Macy turned back, sneering. "Suit yourselves. I don't have an appetite, so I won't be having dinner." She went to the coffee table to pack up her laptop. Edward looked annoyed, but Sharon clung to his arm and whined. "Edward, May's injured. Be nicer to her. Let's go make dinner, and we'll let her know when it's ready." Macy acted as if she hadn't heard Sharon's saccharine voice. She continued gathering her things, ready to head back to her bedroom. Sharon happily carried the groceries to the kitchen. As Macy passed Edward, he frowned. "What are you doing with your laptop?" "Watching dramas," Macy replied without looking up. "What about the graphics tablet?" he pressed. "It's a wrist rest." That was a blatant lie. After all, a wrist rest wouldn't have a data cable attached to it. Ever since yesterday, Macy had been acting particularly cold toward him. It irritated him for some reason. "Edward, come help me with the vegetables," Sharon called sweetly from the kitchen. Edward responded and went inside. He was unaware that Macy, who was now in her bedroom, had heard it all. She laughed mockingly. She couldn't believe that Edward would step into a kitchen. She used to prepare Edward's meals and sometimes even serve them directly to him. He had never lifted a finger to help. She once believed that Edward was one of those men who stayed away from the kitchen due to traditional views. But it turned out he would happily cook for the woman he loved. Macy's room had decent soundproofing, but she could still hear Sharon's voice loud and clear. It was obvious that Sharon was raising her voice on purpose. There was also a constant clatter of utensils. It was almost as if the kitchen was being demolished. Macy didn't care that an outsider had barged into the house as if they owned the place. She just found them noisy. She tried to focus on her video tutorial when suddenly, a sharp shriek rang out. Annoyed, she put on her headphones. Then someone pounded on her door. "Macy, come out," Edward ordered. Macy clenched her fists tightly. She had already given him and Sharon space. She didn't know what else they wanted. The knocking continued as if it wouldn't stop until she opened the door. She stood up, took a deep breath and silently reminded herself, only 28 more days to go. Just bear with it. She opened the door. The first thing Edward said was, "Go make dinner." Sharon isn't used to the stove here and broke a ceramic plate. She almost got hurt. Macy stared at him in disbelief, thinking, "And what does that have to do with me? She broke my plate and almost got hurt. Why do I have to cook?" Out loud, she coldly stated, "I'm injured too." Only then did Edward seem to remember. He glanced down at her foot. She thought that maybe, just maybe, he had a shred of humanity left. Then he said, "Your hands are fine though. Just stand still while you cook." Macy looked up at him. Clenching her fists, she scoffed silently. She was heavily injured, yet Edward insisted that she make dinner just to ensure that his beloved could eat. She had underestimated Edward. He was truly completely heartless. "Can't you guys order takeout? I'm pretty sure plenty of restaurants do delivery. It's not like you can't spare the money," she said. Edward pursed his lips and averted his gaze. He was just about to take his phone out when Sharon spoke up. "May, I came to visit you with the intention to make you dinner. It seems rather insincere of me to order takeout." "Then are you making dinner?" Macy retorted coldly. "I'm not very familiar with the kitchen. I broke a plate earlier." "Edward was so worried about me," Sharon said, blinking innocently. "How about this, May? I'll help you out by setting the table. We'll consider that as me making dinner, okay?" She smiled brightly. But to Macy, it looked incredibly insincere. That it looked like Sharon was determined to make her suffer that day by forcing her to cook while injured. "Never mind. I'll cook for you," Macy said. She figured that Edward and Sharon might as well eat and get lost. Macy did not want to continue dealing with them. No, I'll help you. We'll cook together," Sharon said. Then she began ordering Edward about. "Ed, go set the table. Pour us some juice." She assigned tasks as if she were the lady of the house. While Macy was nothing but the hired cook. In the past, Macy would have felt jealous about this. But not now. Her expression remained indifferent. Ever since Sharon returned to the country and Edward ran to her side, Macy had completely lost hope in him. Behind her, Sharon and Edward whispered intimately. Macy did not turn back. Obediently, Edward did as Sharon instructed. They set the table together, basking in their romantic moment. Sharon clung to Edward's arm coquettishly, deliberately putting on a show for Macy. She wanted to show Macy that she was the one Edward truly loved. Edward, however, lowered his gaze and discreetly pulled his arm away. "Oh, sorry, Ed. I kept thinking about the time when we were dating, so I instinctively held on to you," Sharon said, biting her lip. "It's all right," Edward said. He looked toward the kitchen, only to find that Macy hadn't even turned back. It was as if she hadn't heard them at all. Sharon wandered into the kitchen next. While cleaning the vegetables, she chatted away, casually reminding Macy of Edward's food preferences. To Edward. It sounded like Sharon was teaching Macy how to please him. It filled him with irritation. "You don't need to tell me all that," Macy snapped, unable to hold back any longer. "I've been cooking for him for 2 years. How would she not know about Edward's food preferences?" She didn't need Sharon to tell her all that. Sharon's so-called kind reminders were nothing more than a veiled way of flaunting their 3-year relationship. As soon as she said that, Sharon immediately looked hurt. She looked over at Edward and said bitterly, "Sorry, I forgot. Edward must be used to your cooking now." "Absolutely not." Edward cut her off immediately, his voice loud in urgent denial. "The best she can do is make food that won't kill me. Her cooking tastes like cardboard." Macy tightened her grip on the spatula when she heard this. Cardboard. 2 years of cooking for him. And this was the only review she'd gotten. She didn't even want to argue or justify herself. She'd rather just assume that all her cooking had been thrown into the trash all these years. Sharon brightened when she heard what Edward said and continued talking. "Why are you wasting your breath? She's not worthy of knowing all that," Edward said coldly. "I just wanted to make sure that May takes good care of you in the future," Sharon said, looking back at Edward. She stuck her tongue out at Macy momentarily. Then, she put on a sorrowful expression. "I know I won't have a chance with you anymore. So I want you to be happy no matter who you're with." Edward stared at her, feeling indescribably distressed. The woman he had once loved most was standing right in front of him. But he was already married to someone else. "Let's divorce." Macy turned around suddenly. Her voice was cold,